What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, back for another one, guys. It feels like it's been forever, Derek, since we have done a video together. I know we tried one a couple days ago about some of the better players on the Colts roster in terms of impact, and then obviously the weather kind of influenced that, and we weren't able to do it together and complete that video, but good to be back on together, man. Good to be back in the saddle a little bit and talking about the Indianapolis Colts, because it's kind of felt weird, man. Just like this weird point in the offseason where there wasn't a whole lot going on. There's OTAs, that was about it. And the media really wasn't even out there. And there really just wasn't a whole lot of content, from a creation standpoint to go from. And so it just feels good. It feels right that we are back here today and we are talking about the Colts. Man, how have you been?
I've been all right. I wish that I could say this video I didn't look like a freaking lobster because my skin is all red. I kind of been getting out in the sun a little bit more, especially with work and everything. But all's been good. Just trying to deal with life and balance and work and doing this too. And just kind of sucks, because I'm trying to occupy my days and because of the fact that there's not much to talk about with the Indianapolis Colts right now.
Dude, I feel like for me, it's just been obviously there's so many things that have happened between moving, between new job, between getting engaged, three of the most stressful things people say. I'm just like, I'm taking them all on. So that's why it does feel like it's been a while since I've been able to really do a video. I think the content's just taking a hit because of that, because of kind of the nature of it. But, and obviously I'm going to be gone this whole next week with stuff with my job, but really excited once July hits, man, to really kind of get into it, I think, and kind of jump it back into the content a little bit more when stuff like training camp comes up, because obviously the Colts are almost to the summer as well before training camp, so not going to be a whole lot going on there as well. But anyway, enough talking about us. Let's get into the topic of this video, guys. And, in this one, I did an article about a week ago or so on coltswire.com talking about, looking at the Indianapolis Colts. There are a lot of players, I think I would say, out of this roster that have something to prove, right? There's guys that, were a part of this team the last couple of years or former high picks that you just feel like, man, now is the time for them to really prove that they deserve a spot on this roster for this season and in the future. And so I had initially on my list, I believe I had 6 players. We're going to do I had 5 players in my initial article. We're going to do a little bit more than that. I believe 7 players we're going to talk about today for players who have a lot to prove here going into things like either contract years or maybe just how you view them and how maybe the Colts are going to view them, depending how their season goes for kind of, are they parts of the future of this team, or are they maybe more role players? And so anything and everything in between with that. Really excited to get into this one. And I think we can start, Derek, by talking about some of the offensive guys here. And we can start with a guy who has the last 2 years, especially, been the Indianapolis Colts' #1 receiver. But last year, it felt like even though he, was close to 1,000 yards, he led the Colts in receptions, it felt like it was a down year for Michael Pittman Jr. It just didn't feel like it was the Michael Pittman Jr. that we expected going off of what he did in 2021, the leap that he took from year 1 to year 2. It didn't necessarily look that way from year 2 to year 3. And so obviously there are some factors with the passing game and how really it just was out of commission last year and all out of whack with all the different quarterbacks that the Colts did have last year, and Frank Reich, being let go in the middle of the season, really no offensive scheme, all those factors. But Pittman, I felt like, definitely took a step back in some of the things that we're just not used to see him doing. Like dropping easy passes or fumbling the football in key situations, like just things that Pittman's actually been pretty good about typically in his first 2 seasons. So talk to me about Michael Pittman and what you believe he has to prove here in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, like you said from before, it's hard to really gauge where any of those wide receivers truly are after the season because, just terrible passing game coordination from everyone, right? Like the O-line was bad, the quarterbacks were trash, and the wide receivers were just trying to do everything they can. And for the most part, for most of the year, the wide receivers were the best position group of the entire football team, on the offensive side of the ball, at least. So, I mean, that was pretty impressive because, there were times where they were making plays when the rest of the team just wasn't. So, that feels good to know that, guys like Reggie Wayne could get guys like that involved a lot more. But you're right. Like, Michael Pittman is coming into a contract year. And this is the sort of situation where, Ballard drafted this guy in 2020 to, take over this team. The ultimate hope was this guy could translate into a number one wide receiver for your team going forward. And like you said, he did that from year 1 to year 2. In year 1, he was hurt a little bit. He was out of sorts because he was a rookie. But then year 2 with Carson Wentz, who got him the ball a lot more often early in the year and started playing to his strengths of playing, jump ball with these corners, that really helped Michael Pittman become a lot more dominant. But then, like you said, last year, he took a back seat a lot of times to Alec Pierce in some of these games. And a lot of games, especially at the end of the year, Michael Pittman was, dropping passes that could have easily had been contributors in games and was non-existent in some games. So it was very uncharacteristic of a guy that is supposed to be the number one guy on a team. Like even the Raiders were losing a ton of games last year, Cody, but at the same time, there was no question how good Devontae Adams was and how he could contribute in an offense, even for as bad as the team was. So, you're looking for Michael Pittman to be able to step that up. Like, I know this year is going to, again, be another trial run because of Anthony Richardson, who's an inconsistent quarterback right now. But we want to see Michael Pittman start taking advantage of opportunities now. Now, with this new offensive coordinator and new staff, is that going to come back? We'd like to hope so. But that's the hope that you're getting, is that Michael Pittman gets back to that 2021 form.
Here's a crazy stat that I found when I was doing research on the article. You know what's crazy is Michael Pittman was one of, I believe, let me pull it up here. So Michael Pittman was one of 14 players who recorded over 87 receptions in 2022. But Derek, here's the crazy thing. He was one of only 2 players to not eclipse 1,000 yards. You know who the other guy was? Just take a guess. Who was the other guy? If you had to just think off the top of your head here.
So how many catches for what? How many yards?
87 catches, 87 plus catches. He was one of 14. There was only 2 players, and Pittman was one of them, that did not eclipse 1,000 yards. Who was the other one?
Like Hunter Renfrow or something?
Nope. Austin Eckler, a running back, was the only other player to not eclipse 1,000 yards. So if that tells you how down Michael Pittman was in yards per reception last year, that should tell you everything you need to know, right? He had the targets, he had the volume, he just didn't produce. He didn't produce in terms of actually making plays, and getting down the field and stuff. And so I think it's clear that the Colts are going to target him. I mean, that wasn't a question last year. The question is, can he take advantage, like he talked about, and make bigger plays? And again, it's, he probably will have more opportunities this year, whoever the quarterback is, to have more of those 50-50 balls. So you do think there's a good chance he'll get back there. But yeah, last year it was just crazy that was actually a thing that happened. So yeah, Michael Pittman has a great opportunity here to show that he is the number one moving forward because, like you talked about, he is in a contract year. He has to prove that he is the number one guy moving forward because he's probably going to want to get paid this next offseason, and it really will determine and dictate how much does he get paid. I mean, I would probably right now, if you're asking me, do you re-sign him or not, I would lean towards yes. But I probably wouldn't pay him as much as he could potentially earn if he shows out and proves he's undoubtedly the number one guy, and he turns out to be Anthony Richardson's favorite target. So he has a great opportunity here, Michael Pittman does, to show that 2022 was more of an enigma than the actual who he is as a player. So he's definitely a guy that's going to, we're going to be monitoring a ton to see kind of how he, shakes off last year and some of the bad things that happened there with him. So Michael Pittman's the first guy on the list. Let's move on to the second guy, a guy that Derek, admittedly, I'm kind of surprised is still on the roster, but hey, he has an opportunity still. That's Mo Alley-Cox, the veteran tight end, the veteran of the group, certainly. But we don't really know where he's going to be on this depth chart order, Derek, because last year, he was like the third tight end at a lot of points last year. And, with what you're paying him, you would think you don't feel comfortable paying a number 3 tight end that much money per year. But Mo Alley-Cox is still on the roster. He's, getting closer to 30, so he's getting older. And I think, we've labeled him for so many years as this project guy. And I feel like that's now starting to wear off the last couple of years. You're getting 30, Mo. Like, you can't be considered a project guy forever. Like, it's either now or never. And it feels like he's had opportunities, but hasn't really done a whole lot with them or really been on the field like last year. So talk to me about Mo Alley-Cox and why he has a lot to prove, going into mini camp, training camp, in the preseason and such.
It's no doubt that all these other tight ends that this Colts roster has, there are a lot of guys in this roster that have a great opportunity in Shane Steichen's offense to prove a lot of things to Shane Steichen. And at the end of the day, we're talking about it. Jelani Woods, who's like Mo Alley-Cox, but a slight bit bigger and a lot faster, and can run better routes, has better hands, has better receiving skills, it feels like. Just anything and everything athletically and moving on, he's just better than Mo Alley-Cox right now. And a little bit more consistent too. And then on top of it, Kylan Granson, who is a lot smaller, but he's the kind of guy that's a great route runner. And for this kind of offense that spreads the ball around, Shane Steichen likes to get guys like that open, guys that can create space. And Kylan Granson could see the field. And then Drew Ogletree, who, last training camp was going crazy. There were times where people were wondering if he was going to take the number 2 tight end job this last year, because of how great he was playing. Like, he was playing better than Granson. He was practically playing better than every tight end in training camp until he hurt himself. So it's one of those things where, like, how much more time does that get implemented? Because at some point, Mo has to, be a guy. And of course, Steichen said that, you're going to run the ball to win, but you're going to pass in order to score, and if you can't score, then you can't win. And at the end of the day, it was inconsistent last year, and we got to give him the benefit of the doubt too when it comes to we did it with Pittman. We got to do it with Mo Alley-Cox. The way that Frank Reich and Jeff Saturday ran their offenses personnel-wise was so stupid. There was a lot of different ways that, like, again, Mo Alley-Cox had a phenomenal game against the Tennessee Titans and I believe it was like week 4, week 5 of the season, and then didn't recorded 1 catch in the next 4 weeks. So it's like, that's not all his fault for, the offense not getting him involved. So hopefully we see a resurgence of Mo Alley-Cox, but this is the last chance for him because he's getting to be in that 30 mark, and the other guys are coming up, so he's going to need to step it up.
Yep, and you have a couple other guys you signed. You signed Pharaoh Brown, who does, is traditionally been more of that run blocking tight end, which is something that Mo actually struggled in last year. He's actually been pretty good pretty much his entire career, but last year he was not good at all in that department. And then obviously you did draft Will Mallory as well. So there's so many guys here and so many bodies at the tight end room. It's going to be kind of interesting to see who in the world is that guy moving forward, that maybe fills that third and fourth tight end role, because it's such a deep position and we don't really know, who's going to be that guy that's going to step it up. It's going to be a fun training camp battle to watch with all these tight ends battling it out. So will be interesting to see nonetheless. Let's move on now to the final offensive guy we're going to talk about here, and that's Ryan Kelly. was tempted to put Quentin Nelson on this list as well, but I think Ryan Kelly's clearly the guy that we want to put ahead of anybody on this offensive line. Simply the fact that he's getting paid like a top 10 center right now, Derek, and he has not lived up to that billing, especially like the last 2 years. He is really not. Last year was kind of a culmination of everything. I felt like Ryan Kelly really struggled at, pretty much the entire season. And he kind of looked like a shell of himself in certain ways. And so you don't expect that from a former first-round pick who has traditionally played at a pretty high level. It just seems like, Derek, he has really struggled to find his footing again in the last year and a half or so. So talk to me about Ryan Kelly. And the Colts were initially, he had him on the trading block, and then obviously they decided to keep him around for another year. So talk to me about Ryan Kelly and what he has to prove here in 2023.
Yeah, you and I even had the same questions about him last season. I mean, obviously with the former offensive line coach, Chris Strouser, being in the building last year, there was no doubt that the whole offensive line in general had some severe communication issues. And there was times where you and I would watch back on the film and we'd be like, Ryan Kelly's not even blocking anyone. Like there's multiple plays in the game where he just blocks a gap where no one's there and then refuses to help backside. Like almost like we were wondering, like, is this an offensive line issue, like a communication issue, or is this a I don't care about football anymore issue, or just not understanding football issue anymore? Like that was how bad it was getting, and it was getting Matt Ryan killed in the early part of the season. Doesn't matter if it was no sacks allowed during the first couple weeks. Matt Ryan was getting killed up the middle because Ryan Kelly wasn't blocking people. So, that was a lot to take in. And I'm a little less worried about like him having a rebound. But it's, the rest of the fans, right? Like the fans want to know, like, hey, was this just a fluke year, or are we seeing the rapid decline of the once great Ryan Kelly? So that's kind of what you're doing here. You're trying to maintain your reputation.
Yeah, and I think I like the fact that the Colts kept him around for at least one more year to see, with a new offensive line coach, Tony Sparano Jr., can he get him back to that form? I know he's a little bit older now. He's getting closer to 30. He might be 30 now, but he's getting around that age, where but offensive linemen can play into their 30s pretty easily. So, you do wonder, like, maybe, he just needed kind of a change of scenery in terms of a new coaching staff and kind of a new perspective on how to play the position. So hopefully that'll help him get back to the form, but he definitely has a lot to prove if he wants to prove he can still have a couple more years left with Indianapolis because, it's not often you see, a former Pro Bowl center be on the market like that. So we'll see on that, but Ryan Kelly's a guy that certainly has a lot to prove in terms of his future with Indy. Let's move on to the defensive side of things. We have four guys on the defensive side of things we want to talk about. First guy is Kwity Paye. I don't think it's a question, Derek. Kwity Paye, former first-round pick a couple years ago, 2021. And he's shown flashes, but, it's really been some inconsistency. And it hasn't necessarily been in his play altogether. It's been more just being on the field consistently. Kwity Paye's had some injuries he's dealt with the last couple years, but he's shown, Derek, when he's on the field, he can be productive and he can be a solid all-around player. Talk to me about Kwity, kind of where he is and now entering year 3, and why you feel like and why we feel like, he's kind of a guy here he needs to prove something for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Kwity Paye is, like you said, his biggest issue has been he's been unreliable for a lot of time. I mean, there's been a lot of time that he's been out, and the skills just haven't been able to catch up with the production just because he hasn't had time to be on the field enough to do that. So, Kwity Paye is, again, just like everyone else, like we know that he's got skill, but we got to actually see him actually do it for a full season because I know he's not up for a contract this year, but with the way things are moving right now, I mean, there is a possibility that, Kwity Paye, we could see the last of him at some point if, Dayo Adangbo picks up pace, and if, people continue to, if the Colts may try to look a different direction on that. So, I mean, I know Ballard doesn't like to give up on guys like that, but I mean, if Kwity Paye is a first-round draft pick, he's going to want money, but at the end of the day, he's not going to get much if, he can't continue to perform.
Yep. And Chris Ballard's shown, we've seen it with guys, if the guy's not, living up to the standards and doing what the Colts feel like they need to do, they're fine with moving on from him. Obviously, you don't want to do that. You want your first and second and third round picks to pan out. But like Ballard has shown no hesitation to move on if he really wants to fix a position. And this has just been the one, Derek, that he has just continued to swing and so far doesn't really have a hit, at edge rush. So Kwity Paye has an opportunity here to be a guy that maybe breaks into that 8 to 10 sack category territory area. But it all depends on can he stay healthy and can he be consistent. And if he can do that this year, I think that makes you feel a lot better about where you currently stand at defensive end because there's a lot of questions. And I think right now, Derek, there's a lot more questions at edge rush than there is answers. And Kwity Paye has an opportunity to be a part of the answer and not more of different questions at that position. So, yeah, if he doesn't perform this year, Derek, I wouldn't be shocked at all if you see the Colts, depending where they are next year, taking a first-round pass rusher. Like, I wouldn't be shocked at all if they did that. But if Kwity does show out, maybe they decide to go a different direction. So it really depends. It's kind of a big year for him in that frame point and that discussion for him. So let's move on now to the linebackers. And a guy that I think we were pretty obvious was going to make this list, Shaq Leonard. Former All-Pro. He's been a guy that's been a model of consistency for Indy ever since he got drafted in 2018. This last year was a different kind of year for Shaq, though. I mean, he really struggled, to stay on the field at all. He played only a couple games, and when he came back, he got hurt again and was out, and he just felt like he never got back to where he should have been and where he hoped to be after that surgery he had on his back. And now he's here. He hasn't practiced in OTAs. He wasn't out there in minicamp. He hasn't been out there so far. He's just really taking his time. But this is a big year for Shaq, Derek, because he got paid a couple off seasons ago. And, he's lived up to it one year, but last year was a really disappointing year for Shaq. And as good as the linebackers played last year, they really missed his playmaking presence in that defense.
Yeah, I mean, I have a less worry about Shaq Leonard than most. But, I mean, you got people that are literally worried that, like, Shaq Leonard will never play again, which is hilarious because we've seen him have practice clips uploaded of him, doing workouts and moving at a pretty good pace right now. Just clearly just needs a little bit more time to get his body right. There has been no indication to say that he won't be ready for the season, and vice versa. There's been no indication to say that he will be. So, I mean, we're just kind of in the dark, and it's, again, just the Colts fans' PTSD of the Andrew Luck situation all over again. So, we just gotta just go into a situation where we say, hey, listen, guys, I mean, we're gonna figure it out. And, even getting a 75% Shaq Leonard for the next year is still a really, really good linebacker. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just sitting back. I'm just waiting just to see how he does. That's the ultimate thing we got to do here. But, a lot of Colts fans are worried, but they kind of just need to just wait it out. But at the end of the day, that's where Shaq's at right now. He's got to come back, and he's got to prove to everyone that he's still got it.
I get why Colts fans are feeling that way, though. There was a lot of uncertainty with the Andrew Luck situation, and I'm not saying it's similar to that at all, but there were some of those questions and concerns, and you didn't have a lot of answers, and it feels like it's the same way with Shaq. And, just unknown injuries and like unknown timelines are just a scary thing in general. If you're a fan and you don't really know, you never like to not have, an answer when it comes to that. So I don't blame fans at all for feeling that way, but hopefully Shaq, and they're just being more cautious with him, and he can be a full go when training camp does, come at the end of July, early August, and he can be ready to go. And I'm honestly fine if he sits out, this period. And then if he's fully healthy, it makes a lot of sense, and I'm totally good with that. So, but Shaq does have a lot to prove that he can get back to that form because, he even asked himself, can I be the maniac? after last year, how hard that year was for him when he opened up about that at the end of the year. That was a tough year for him, one of the lowest years of his life. And so, how does he use that to, motivate himself to come back? I really think it's going to be a cool story if he is able to get back, how he came from basically the pit to where he, hopefully gets to. So Shaq certainly has a lot to prove, but hopefully he's progressing in the right direction there. So, all right, another guy here, a guy that's been a mainstay in this Colts defense really since 2018 as well, Kenny Moore. By far the most disappointing Colt last year on the defensive side of things. I mean, we came in expecting this guy to be a top corner in the slot, and he was one of the worst corners in the NFL last year. I mean, it was crazy how bad he was. I know he was dealing with some injuries. There were some other concerns, some frustrations with the scheme and things like that. But Kenny Moore comes in, fresh perspective. He's talked some things out with the Colts and stuff, and seems like he's a guy that's motivated, Derek, and hopefully that'll translate to good play on the field. But Kenny Moore certainly has a lot to prove if he wants to have a future in Indianapolis in their corner room.
Yeah, I mean, very disappointing year last year. And it's crazy, too, because, you want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, there's just a lot of things going against Kenny Moore right now. Wanted a new contract last offseason, didn't get it. Chris Ballard said, we're going to wait. And then sure enough, and then he has the worst year of his entire NFL career. So it's like, did he take it personally? Did he say, I just didn't want to perform as well? Or was that in the back of his mind? Or was it just getting used to a new defensive coordinator, that sort of vibe, which is kind of odd because like the rest of the defense didn't seem to have a problem with, adapting to this new defensive scheme. So why was Kenny Moore one of the only ones that struggled? And don't even mention Brandon Faison's name, people. I know what you're thinking, but at the same time, Brandon Faison was just trash, okay? Yeah. So anyways, but yeah, Kenny Moore, he's got the most to prove when it comes to a lot of guys on the defense because if he wants another contract, definitely going to have to improve versus what he did last year and prove that, he's worthy of being considered a top cornerback again.
Yep, absolutely. And then the last guy in the list, another guy that's entering a contract year. He just made a switch from free safety to strong safety. That's Julian Blackman. A guy that Derek, he was lighting the world on fire his rookie season. If it wouldn't have been for Chase Young doing what he did, I really think Julian Blackman had a great chance to be the defensive rookie of the year. And then obviously had the major injury in year number 2 that came back last year and played in almost every game. Which was great to see, and definitely seems like Julian Blackman's trajecting in the right way, and which is exciting. And now making the switch to strong safety, I've always felt like Julian Blackman plays bigger than he is. He's always been a guy that's not afraid to come up and lay the wood and make a big hit, and kind of lay his body on the line. And I know traditionally when you think of strong safeties, you think of guys that are 200, 215. But Blackman's a little bit undersized for a strong safety, but I think he has a great opportunity here, not just as a player, but also as a leader in this locker room as well, Derek, with, obviously, last year with Rodney McLeod and all that stuff and him, moving on and signing with Cleveland, it opens the opportunity for Julian Blackman to be that veteran voice in that young safety room. So talk to me about Blackman and kind of what he has to prove here coming into this year.
Well, contract year, like we said in a recent video, contract year, he's got to deal with it. And, he's been dealing with the injury bug too. So he's kind of been in the same boat as a couple other players on this list. And it's in the same situation where you got to perform. And there's a couple other guys that are sitting behind him that could really use that spot if Julian Blackman doesn't, stay healthy and continue to progress like we need him to. Because, again, he was such a phenomenal player his rookie year. Would have won defensive rookie of the year had Chase Young not had that year that he had before he got injured. And then, sure enough, Julian Blackman just hasn't quite recovered from that sense. So, hopefully, like I said, Julian Blackman gets back to what he was. Because if he is, then that's going to be a fired backfield there in the secondary with Rodney Thomas and Julian Blackman back there.
Absolutely. So, guys, those are the players that we have as players with the most to prove here for the Indianapolis Colts heading into the 2023 season. Let us know if there's any other players that you would include as well. I could hear potentially a couple other guys as well, but these are the ones that we kind of narrowed it down and talked about. So let us know your thoughts in the comments below, but that'll do it for this one, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Really appreciate all the support. And as always, guys, go Colts.